All right, it is time for the midweek. We are so glad that you are joining us this week. We got to hear a beautiful sermon from two of my favorite pastors, Ben Horstman and Chris Nation, this weekend. And we want to follow a little bit of a thread of something that Ben talked about. We're going to save all of our Chris Nation for something really special in the future. But for now, let me remind you of something that Ben said. Watch this.
Nazareth? Are you sure? There's not much going on there, Philip. Nazareth's kind of a small, kind of a boring place. There's no way. Like, can anything good come from there? And that gets us to the second part of the question. What thing is Nathanael talking about? Well, like most Jews in this time period, Nathanael expected God's Messiah, which is really just a Hebrew way of saying God's king. He expected God's Messiah to show up and act in specific ways. They were looking for someone distinguished, someone powerful, this mighty warrior who would come and defeat the enemies of the Jewish people. They were looking for this great king, this king like King David, who would usher in this new dynasty and rule over his people with righteousness and justice. In other words, they were looking for a big shot. Nathanael was looking for a big shot Messiah, and big shots don't come from Nazareth.
So big shots don't come from Nazareth because Nazareth is a tongue twister, and it's a really small town, right?
Yeah, little bitty town. Yeah.
And so I like, did you grow up in a small town?
You know, I grew up in a small-ish town. It was in Mississippi, not far from Jackson, which was the big town.
Gotcha.
It was probably about like Fenton.
About the size of Fenton, but more removed from Jackson than like Fenton is from St. Louis.
That's right. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so we had more than one stoplight, more than one restaurant.
Yeah. Did you have anybody playing the banjo?
No, but you play the banjo.
I do.
All right, so Lady Bird?
Do you want to talk more about the banjo?
Freebird?
I've never played Freebird on the banjo, but Ben and I were joking about this because he was like, Freebird, I mean, I imagine that would sound terrible on the banjo, and I was just trying to stick to my shtick, and so
because
I was like,
if you don't know, Tim plays the banjo.
I was like, no, that would sound amazing on the banjo.
He plays the banjo.
But I have no
In
idea.
fact, do you remember when we were all locked down, quarantined, and I talked you into recording a little thing?
I put a couple videos up
we posted
on the social medias of the banjo.
Okay, so we're going to call you on this Freebird thing.
Okay.
And you need to come in a couple weeks and
play a little Freebird.
Yeah.
I'll see what I can do.
Okay.
I'll see what I can do. I don't know if it works or not, but we'll try. Can I tell you this?
Back to our...
I grew up here in St. Louis, so I'm not from a small town. I have several family members who are.
So you've pretty much always lived right here.
Pretty much, although I lived about 3 years in Kirksville, Missouri. Go Bulldogs for those of you Truman and Northeast folks. But like you guys will be with me on this, Kirksville is a small town.
Okay.
It's maybe not as small as Nazareth was, but it is small. And so I kind of understand that weird feeling of like, first of all, you fall in love with towns like that.
Yeah.
There's something really special about them if you're from there. But on the other hand, we don't expect some big shot Messiah to come out of a town like Kirksville. We think he's going to come from New York or from LA or Chicago, like one of the big towns.
More glamorous.
Right? Yeah.
Bigger experience. Yeah.
But one of the things I love about the Christian faith is that it's a Nazareth kind of faith.
It is.
I don't mean that it's like a small town, but like this is who Jesus is.
Right. I mean, look at what's important to our Christian faith, what Jesus came to teach us. Serve.
That's right.
Right? To what big shots like to be served. So serve, love. We pray, let me decrease, you increase.
Right.
Take the last seat, not the first seat.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all flip-flopped.
It is. It's that idea in Philippians 2 where the God of the universe, the one who had all power and authority belonging to him, made himself nothing and became a servant.
Yeah, and Ben's whole point was even where he was born, he was turning things different than what they were looking for, what they were expecting.
He really was.
What they were hoping for.
Yeah.
And you've probably had this before. I realize sometimes, like before you get married, you realize that you have expectations that you weren't even consciously aware of.
Okay.
Like it's going to look like this. The Messiah is going to come.
Yes.
And it's going to be like this. Marriage is going to look like this.
Right.
Being the mom of a young baby, and we don't even know that we've painted a picture. So I wonder if for those disciples, it was like, wait, Nazareth, that's not in my,
It's not what I expected at all.
right.
And yet it makes sense.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. And so, speaking of this idea of things being small and us being called to serve, one of the ways we're being called to serve as a church in the
Yeah.
days to come is with this Pray for the Lou. We're having the chapel, which hopefully you're able to join us with tomorrow. If not, it will be streamed online on Facebook Live and YouTube Live, just like this, so you'll get a chance to watch it there. And then we have our prayer walks on Saturday morning, starting at 9 a.m. that are going to be so powerful.
Right, and we talked a couple weeks ago about that when he was
when Kurt was here.
when Kurt was here. But I want to reemphasize that we feel like prayer really makes a difference.
We do.
And whether you think you're an expert prayer or know what you're doing, join us, and let's just see what God will do as He answers those prayers.
Yeah, that'll be what's interesting, is to see what God does in, like, after. It's one thing for us all to gather and pray, but then it's another thing to go, okay, let's watch how God answers those prayers and how our community is changed in really significant and meaningful ways in the future.
Right. So if you come Saturday morning at any of our campuses, right?
That's right. 9
The
a.m.
campus pastors will be there, and we'll be walking people through how to do that.
And then send them out to neighborhoods to pray in their neighborhoods, and then we'll all join together in an online experience at like 10:45, and we'll get a chance to hear from Greg on that, and that'll be kind of what brings it all together. So it's going to be a powerful experience.
Yeah.
And then, can I just say, another thing I'm looking forward to celebrating as a church is the fact that Easter is just around the corner.
Right.
You know?
Here it is. And a year ago, it was a different Easter than any of us had ever experienced.
That Easter, you all will
before.
remember, we had online services only.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this is for my heart, this is going to do my heart good, that at least a lot of us will be together, and it'll
Yep.
be a different experience than a year ago. And I appreciate it more.
Yeah.
It's such a privilege and honor that we get to
Oh my
worship
gosh,
together.
It's going to be so meaningful for us to be together. And so hopefully everyone's making their plans and getting reservations and all that kind of thing. And we are going to be checking those reservations, because we really do we want to serve as
Right.
many people as we can. And then on the other hand, Angela, there's some folks who are even watching this, we're going to be worshiping online
Yeah.
together. We're not going to be in the physical buildings. And I want you to know it's going to be special for you too. We are going to do this together as a church and celebrate the resurrection. Right?
I'm really looking forward to that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Good Friday, we've got some cool things that are coming up there. There will be an online Good Friday worship moment that you'll be able to participate in, some prayer stuff we're doing in the building. So just keep your ear open for all of that kind of stuff that's
Right.
coming down
yeah.
the pike.
Watch for those.
But here's the other thing. You were just talking about how crazy that was Easter when we were worshiping online only. This weekend marks the 1-year anniversary of when we shut our buildings down.
That's right.
It's this weekend.
That's right. And never would I have thought that, all across our country, all across the world, that churches would voluntarily stop meeting.
I know.
Because of this thing. But here's a year later, do you want to know my takeaway?
What's your takeaway?
So that weekend when we closed down, we thought, is it a month? And it was
Yeah.
all unknown. We didn't understand any of what was in front of us, how we were going to do our jobs, the virus, all
Yep.
of it. And now, a year later, I am impressed with how the church kept going. The church, we weren't even physically coming together, and people kept coming to know Christ through explorations. We talked last week with Amanda about how we kept serving.
We kept serving in the
We kept
community.
worshiping together.
Yeah.
We celebrated Christmas.
Yeah.
I mean, it just warms my heart to know that the church just kept marching on. We kept moving forward.
So true. I'm reminded of when Jesus looked at Peter and said, I'm going to build my church upon this rock, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it.
Nothing will prevail against it. Nothing.
Yeah,
And so
very cool.
I'm actually encouraged a year later that the church kept meeting. We kept giving. You kept joining us online, and we just kept going.
We did. And on the other hand, it was quite a year, right?
Yeah.
In the pre-service this weekend, we shared like a couple of families put together these time capsules. If we were going to try to help someone understand 30 years from now what COVID was all about, what would you put in your time capsule to help with that? And we had the Webb family and the Correct family both showed us their time capsules. Angela, I'm curious what you would put in a time capsule
Well,
if you were... If you're gonna
Toilet
do
paper
this
was a
for
really
COVID.
interesting.
Toilet paper
That's
is
really interesting.
Remember that?
My sister says the next virus that hits might be like more of a cold, and we'll run out of cough drops, or it might be.
Right, who knows?
It's weird. I would put a mask. I'd never worn a mask before.
I hadn't either.
I have used hand sanitizer before, but it was,
It was a thing.
Now there's all kind of flavors and
Yeah.
smells and
Yeah.
so I think things like that.
Yeah, I've got some puzzles I would put in there because we definitely worked puzzles, a couple movies that we got to see over the course of this year. And then I would also put some walking shoes in there because, man, did I go on a lot of walks when the weather was nice, especially early on. Yeah, I'll never forget what that was like.
That's right.
So all good stuff. Listen, we've got an interaction question we want to ask you, and we're going to keep moving. But this will just connect to what Ben was talking about, where we're headed tonight. But the question is just this: what's a truth that has anchored you in times of searching? So maybe in this last year, maybe in other seasons of your life where you've been, where Ben talked about being, where he kind of stared at the ceiling and said, is any of this even true? What's a truth that you cling to that's been a go-to truth for you in times of searching? Let us know what that is in the Facebook comments, and we'll come back to those at the end. But really, it kind of gets us back a little bit into this conversation that we're having that's totally connected to the weekend. So let's go back to something that Ben said again. Watch this.
All of us have asked versions of Nathanael's question. They might not involve hopes of a great king or a really small city, but we've all expected God to show up in certain ways. I mean, God says he's going to redeem and restore all things. He says he's going to bring his peace. He says he's going to do away with evil and the old order of things will pass away. That's what he says. But do we see that? Is that our day-to-day experience? We long for God to show up and set everything right, but instead, we get Nazareth.
So we've all been through these seasons of life where we have expectations that feel like let down, and sometimes we look at God and go, God, where were you and what are you doing? Now, he's always at work, but at times we have that feeling that Ben just described where we go, instead we get Nazareth. And as I was thinking about what it's like to experience that and what it's like to experience those times of searching where you're trying to figure out what God's up to and there are unmet expectations, I started to think about one of our friends, Steve Callahan. And so Steve is joining us on the midweek this evening. Steve, thanks so much for being here.
Happy to be here.
Yeah,
Glad to be part of this.
It's so great to have you. Tell us really quickly, for people who don't know you, just tell us your roles here at the Crossing, because you do a ton.
Everybody knows me from the parking lot.
That's right. You're one of the friendly folks waving people in.
I try to wave people in. I do a facilitation for Explo. I'm on the prayer team. I'm on the advisory board. Help out in kids once in a while.
Yep.
So really just plugged in a lot of places. It's our great way to spend some time. Yeah,
well, you do a lot of different things, and so chances are, particularly if you're at the Chesterfield campus, you'll see Steve around quite a bit. But Steve, you and I first met actually because you were doing something else with the Crossing.
Yeah, the living water trip down to Guatemala. We were roomies in a. It was one step above camping hotel.
It was just barely.
Barely.
But I had forgotten that we were roomies.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Been blotted out of your mind.
If you'll sign up for another one, we promise you a different room.
I did, and I said, as long as Tim's not going, I'm in. No, it was an amazing trip.
We had a great time.
Got water, and it was just great to be in that community.
Absolutely. We had such a good time getting to know each other. And so, so I'm grateful that you would be here. So, Steve, one of the reasons you came to mind is you were actually a part of our, what we call our cardboard testimonies from a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, we've got a shot of you. So you lost your way chasing a career, found your way chasing Jesus. And that is your story. So I wonder if you would spend just a minute just telling us, where was that moment where you kind of found yourself searching?
A long time ago, I wish I wrote the date down, but Greg preached on "You are what you worship," and I remember my wife Christy and I sitting in church, and he threw out the question, "What do you worship?" And I was kind of like, "I don't worship. I don't know." Nothing came to mind, and but I couldn't stop thinking about that question. I couldn't stop thinking about it, and it really started. Unsettlingly to me became clear it was my career. It was what I had put in front of a lot of the really important things of my life, faith, family, my friends, was my pursuit of a career. And not a particular job, just what I had done to be able to get ahead and move forward, and then it became really clear. I couldn't stop thinking like, well, that is, and the trade-offs were sort of innocuous at first. They weren't as obvious, but then it's well, how many soccer games did you miss? How many swim meets or water polo matches didn't you make? No one was asking me that, but that's what those are the questions I think God was asking me.
Well,
where should you be?
Yeah, well, it's what I love about just you even coming and telling us this story, Steve, is that this is something you were wrestling with inside the Christian faith. I mean, you've been a follower of Jesus for a long time.
Very much so, and
yeah.
and I think the real bedrock of that whole internal conversation and the conversations in prayer was, this isn't what God had intended for me. And clearly the things that brought me the most joy in my life, serving my wife, my kids, I was putting them aside. Working 7 days a week, 7 days a week, working 12 hours a day, being on calls when I should have been present. Even when I was there, I wasn't always present, looking at my phone, I was on the road a lot. And that's not what my wife signed up for. We like each other. We get along really well. And I wasn't me. I was short. I wasn't sleeping well. The stress was just wasn't worth it.
So you got to a place where you said something has to change.
Right.
And you were telling us earlier that you, with the help of some conversations, you started to figure out how to navigate that phase.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I had invested so much time and energy into my career. The idea of doing something different frightened me. And countless nights and days praying about what would be next. What's, if not all this, then what? And honestly, I still don't have that answer clearly. But what God gave me the strength to do was to go have a conversation with my boss and say, I don't think this is good for me. And if it's not good for me, it's probably not good for this place. And so how do we work through this?
Yeah.
So much time and energy invested. And again, it wasn't about that job. It was all a compilation of 15 years of pursuing this career, 20, but really the last 15 years of putting a lot of things aside. And I had a team that I still care desperately about. And I didn't want to just walk in one day and say, that's it, I've had enough.
Yeah.
Good things were happening. They just weren't the right fit for me.
Right.
And so we worked it out and had adult conversations about adult topics and ended on a good note.
It ended on a good note, and God met you in it.
Yeah,
Right?
totally.
And even as you left that role, and now you're kind of in the season of navigating what's next for you and whatever, it opened up an opportunity for you to do something really, really pretty
Comfort
pretty
in knowing
awesome.
His plan is good, and that His plan is what's right for me. And when I put Him first, I trust that.
Yeah.
I trust that, and it's not it's days where I'm like, oh, I got to do something. I'm not good at not being engaged a lot. I
Right.
was sort of raised that way, and now it's okay to have some time on my hands.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky and blessed to have that.
And so speaking of time on your hands, there was this moment where you go, you know what, I think I've got an opportunity here in the midst of all of this to reconnect with God in a really profound way. And so you get to do something really cool, something I'll say I'm jealous of. Tell everybody what you did.
Yeah, last July I did a 495-mile backpack from Denver to Durango. It's called the Colorado Trail.
Yeah.
It's about 90,000 feet of elevation gain.
Holy cow.
So you're never walking on flat ground. It's
Wow.
almost always up or down. 28 days of sleeping on the ground in a tent. And just blown away by how amazing God's creation is. You get to these places, you're wiped out, you've just blown your lungs out climbing, and then you get to the top of these passes and you look around and just, you don't see a road, you don't see another person, and it's humbling. It's really humbling. And I think the other really cool part was I got disconnected purposefully from my phone and from sort of the outside world for days at a time, just no coverage out in the wilderness areas. And learned very quickly that so much of the stress that I had been encountering was really self-inflicted, because I had, that device was just constantly alerting me to things, and, did I really need to know the things that were coming at me? And it was really transformational to have the alerts off, to not have a phone that buzzed or vibrated or dinged in my pocket. And that left me a lot of time to pray and to really reflect on myself and spend time with God. 12 or 13 hours a day of walking.
Wow.
You better be comfortable with yourself, because you
get that
get a
way.
lot of time. But just an amazing
Sounds
trip.
like during that time you could have answered, "What do you worship?" You just said, "I worship Jesus here." He now took center stage.
Right.
That's
Yeah, the step away from work was really hard and frightening and very unsettling. And a lot of my image, I thought, was what people thought of me was built around that. And honestly, that's probably so not important.
right.
What my friends and family know me as and what God knows me as is really important.
Yeah.
Really, really, really important. And it's not going to be because I was some big title at some company doing some job. That's hopefully will never be anyone's legacy. It's how you've left people and where you were. So,
Well, I'm so personally grateful for the way that
Yeah.
you've shared your story with us, but even more so for how you've reconnected with Jesus and continue to make that the focal point, because those of us who get to be your friend and get to serve alongside you in ministry, we get to reap the benefits of a Steve who is, got his life centered on Jesus. And so thank you so much for taking the time to come and be here.
happy to be part of it.
Yeah, it's great. Well, ultimately, what you're kind of describing to me is it comes down to this idea of an invitation, that Jesus is saying, wherever you are, if you're stuck in the middle of idolatry, that you didn't get there on purpose. It's easy to get distracted, and step by step you find yourself off track. Jesus just looks at us and says, come back, come and see, and follow me, and see if I don't do something in your life and get you back on the right path. And so that's a little bit of what Ben kind of said in closing this weekend. So here's one more clip from Ben.
And he looks at us and he says, come on, let's go. Here's the invitation. Let's do this together. Come and see. No matter where we are in our journeys, no matter what faith questions or doubts you've brought into this room today, whether you follow Jesus or not, that's the message for all of us. Jesus looks at us and he says, come and see. Come and see how I meet you in your questions and your doubts. Come and see how I put people in your life to help you find answers. Come and see how good and wonderful and faithful I am. Come and see this future that I'm calling you to. It may not be what you expect, but it'll be better than you could ever imagine. Come and see.
Ben says that Jesus invites us to come, and he puts people alongside us, and in the middle of our searching, we can find hope. We can find a reconnection with him. And Angela, we were talking about this as we were planning for the midweek, and there was a specific verse, a passage of scripture that just kind of came to you loud and clear that you wanted for us to talk about.
Yeah, because it actually came to me in a time when Ben talked about just looking up and going, he talked about putting all his eggs in one basket. And he reached a point where he was like, did I miss it? Am I spending my life on the wrong thing? I had a moment like that years ago and ran across Psalm 73. And I'm just going to read a little bit of it and summarize a little bit of it to tell you how it touched me, how it was God's invitation to me, right? It starts by saying, truly God is good to Israel, to those whose hearts are pure. But as for me, I almost lost my footing. My feet were slipping and I was almost gone. So the psalmist starts to describe a time where he almost lost his faith. And he says, and I'll summarize this part, he started envying the wicked. And he said, because they prosper, they live painless lives. Their bodies are healthy and strong. They don't have any troubles. They have everything their hearts could ever wish for. So he's looking at the lives of those not walking with God, going, that their life is better. And first of all, you can't look at someone's life and really know
Right.
what's going on.
Right.
But from his perspective, he was getting lost in, I think I've spent my life on the wrong thing. In fact, he says in verse 13, did I keep my heart pure for nothing? Did I keep myself innocent for no reason? I get nothing but trouble all day long. Every morning brings me pain. So I tried to understand why the wicked prosper, but what a difficult task it is.
Wow.
So he has concluded their life is easy, mine is hard. I'm trying to understand why that's true, and he just couldn't wrap his head around it. And then this psalm takes a turn, and it says, then I went into your sanctuary, O God, and I finally understood. Then he got quiet before God. Then he answered the call, come and see. And for me, it was a moment when I got quiet before God and said, I don't understand. And he says, reconnect to me. And the psalmist goes on, then I realized that my heart had become bitter, and I was all torn up inside. I was so foolish and ignorant, I must have seemed like a senseless animal to you. So he's got perspective again. He has spent time with God and gotten perspective, and he looks back and goes, I was bitter, and I lost my footing. I was moving away from you. But this is so beautiful. He says, yet I still belong to you. Like that didn't disqualify me. You know, God stays close. He lets us ask those questions, and he lets us go through those times. And he says, you hold my right hand. You guide me with your counsel, leading me to a glorious destiny. Whom have I in heaven but you? I desire you more than anything on earth. And then, because in the beginning it was like, they're healthy, I get sick, they don't have pain, I have pain. But then he concludes, my health may fail. I mean, that might happen. My health may fail, my spirit may grow weak, but God remains the strength of my heart. He is mine forever. But for me, how good it is to be near God. I have made the sovereign Lord my shelter, and I will tell everyone about the wonderful things that you do. So he starts by saying, I lost my footing because I had my eyes on comparing.
Yep.
And then I went to God.
Well, I love, can I just, the commentary on that is I love how he's like, all of you who in Israel are pure and everything's great, you know, good for you.
That's right.
Right? As for me,
This isn't working for me.
I lost my footing.
Yeah.
It's not working for me.
That's right.
Until he goes into God's sanctuary.
Until he gets, and for me, that means, I mean, for Steve, that was hiking in the woods, right? To just get alone with God somehow.
Right.
And for me, it's getting quiet before him, letting him speak peace. It's reading the Psalms. When I read this Psalm, it was a turning point for me.
Yep.
So getting into God's word, but letting him, instead of trying to understand on our own. Ben's moment was when a friend said, but you've experienced Jesus, right? And Ben said that happened to him in a time where his head was full of biblical knowledge.
Right.
Just full of biblical knowledge. But what mattered was, no, but you've experienced Jesus.
He's experienced Jesus.
Yeah.
And when you experience Jesus, you get to this place to where, I mean, we have a saying that Greg has used before, and I haven't heard it in a while, but we come back to it every once in a while. It's just you don't realize how Jesus is all you need until Jesus is all you got. And right?
Yeah,
and for
yeah.
Ben, it was that moment of going, I've experienced Jesus, and for me, that's enough.
That's enough.
It's the same as when Peter in John 6 looks at Jesus and goes, I got no other place to go.
That's
Where
right.
else would I turn? You have the words of eternal life.
Yeah.
And what I love, Angela, about this psalm is that the psalmist says the very same thing in verse 25, which you read, which is, whom have I in heaven but you? Like, God, you're all I have.
Right.
And you're all I need.
Right.
And so we get to a place to where we become anchored in that truth, that at the end of the day, we have Jesus. And,
Right.
and he's all we need. He's everything that we need.
Right.
Right?
And the key with each one, for me, I bet you have stories, and for all of those is when I recentered my heart on him. On him. Not what he does for me, not what he's done through me, or it's him.
Yeah.
It's on him.
It is. So for me, that truth that I go to that anchors me when I'm searching or when I'm struggling is, strangely, but I've just come to this, is I am my beloved's and he is mine. At the end of the day, I have him and I know that he has me. And I stake my faith on that.
Right, and it recenters your
It
heart.
recenters me. I have a really good friend, someone very close to me, who said there was a season of life around college where he really struggled with his faith. He felt distant from God. He was having a hard time going to church, as college students do sometimes. And he said the one thing that kept him connected in his relationship with Jesus was the Lord's Prayer.
Wow.
I couldn't pray anything else. I was dealing with guilt and shame from being far from him, all of this, but I could pray the Lord's Prayer and it made me feel near to him. And I believe God honors those moments when we seek him like that,
Yeah, and he
So
can handle the questions, and he can handle our doubt.
we can bring all of it to him. You were talking about John the Baptist in a
Right.
conversation earlier today, and how even John sent people to Jesus going, did I stake my life on the wrong thing?
In essence, did I miss
Are
it?
you the one who's to come?
Yeah.
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 And Jesus very gently reminds him, I'm on the job. This is it. So we asked you all to share some of those truths that anchor you in times of searching, and you've shared some beautiful, beautiful scriptures with us. And so I want to read these now. Maybe there's some of you who are watching this who are not as familiar with Scripture, or who are like, I'm searching right now and I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have that truth that anchors me. I don't know how to stay connected to Jesus. I'm still trying to figure that out. Well, guess what? I want to read some of these scriptures that other people watching, like you, have shared, and maybe they can encourage you. Maybe they can help anchor you to some kind of a truth that there is a God out there who loves you, who went to great lengths to find you, and who never leaves or forsakes us, but is always faithful. And maybe this will help you learn what it looks like to cling to him when we're searching. So here's some of the scriptures that you all shared. In Isaiah 41, he is my God, he will uphold me. Romans 8, nothing can separate us from the love of God. Absolutely. God is an ever-present help in my time of need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can endure all things through Christ who strengthens me. Christ is the solid rock on which I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. So good. When we're searching for wisdom, one of our moderator on Facebook says, when I'm struggling and searching for wisdom, stop thinking like me and start thinking like Jesus. From Romans 12, verse 2, which is great. Remembering the Spirit of the living God resides in me. He is my ever-present source of hope, peace, wisdom, and strength. So good. I'm hoping that as you hear those words and share them with each other, that they encourage you, that they remind you that you're never alone, and that God is inviting you to continue to trust in him, to continue to turn to him, to come and see, to taste and see that the Lord is good. And that's our prayer for you this week. God bless you, and we'll see you this weekend.